one thing that South Africa have got to sort out is their lineout. When your lineout's going at 68% in a test match, in fact, it was actually worse before they made the change. Malcolm Marx, I think, was like at 60% off his throws. I'm not going to start writing any obituaries for South African rugby just on the basis of one test. But having said that, I thought outstanding performance by Australia.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Let's talk South Africa versus Australia, Tony, because this result has just flipped world rugby on its head. Gone is the aura of invincibility. Gone is the bogeyman. And I must admit, I'm guilty of being one of those people who sat there the whole time thinking, oh my God, this team is just so big, so strong, so fast. They've got 5 players in every position. How the hell can you combat them? You know, you're not going to be able to stop them on the ground, in the air. They win everything. And all of a sudden, Australia in the last 63 minutes just ripped it all to pieces, didn't they? And said, no. We'll contest the breakdown. We'll run you big guys off your feet. And in the end, we'll actually embarrass you, which is what they did on the high veld. I mean, and Rassie Erasmus is right. He can blame his own players. I thought he was gracious enough to say, hey, Australia played really well. He really carved up his own. But he's got big questions of himself here, doesn't he? Because about the tactics, about the way he's asking those guys to play, about wanting to play a style that perhaps may not be their style. But also, was their preparation good enough? They've been on the high veld for 4 weeks, Tony. And they got turned over and they got gassed.
Everything about that game was astonishing. It's one of the most astonishing test matches
and you
I
don't
have
get
ever
that
seen.
Often in test rugby, do you? Where you're sitting there at the end of it going, wow, I didn't expect that.
When did anyone come from that far back to beat the Springboks? I know in the All Blacks in 1997 they played a test at Ellis Park. Famous test because Frank Bunce scored
those
two tries.
We won at 35-32 and we were way down in that game.
23-7.
Was it? Okay. Well, that's not 22-0 after 17 minutes,
it's not
is it?
after that amount of time. And I have to say, I thought, well, everything that we thought and we talked about last week when I said that I thought that South Africa obviously had to start as favourites. Warm favourites, I think was the word, which was probably a little bit euphemistic. I thought probably raging hot favourites.
Yeah.
But just feeling that Australia at least had something to build on off the back of that series against the Lions. And at one point later on the week, I thought, Australia, they could snatch a draw maybe, or what if they did that?
But it wasn't a lucky win in any set, and it wasn't a last gasp win, or it wasn't a refereeing call. They smoked them, Tony.
But what I was saying is that all of that thinking went out the window after 20 minutes when they're down 22-0. I thought, this is going to be...
Could be 50 or 60,
an obliteration here. But a couple of things happened. Firstly, Australia got a chance to bring their wingers into the game. Max Jorgensen is phenomenal. That in and out that he does, he is electrifying. And Peach on the other wing is strong. And unfortunately, it looks like they're going to lose him. It looks like he's got a broken jaw. But they were able to give them a couple of opportunities that sparked things. But also, to me, the Springboks went away from something that they are so good at. And you look back at their success over the last 5-6 years, everyone looks at their forward pack. At Peter Steph Dutoy, at Eben Etzebeth, at Tiyaka, all of the Malcolm Marx and co. Massive forwards, and you think that's the key to their game. To me, the key to their game has actually been their kicking game. Their short kicking game, their contestable kicking game. The only ones who've come close to that are France with Dupont, who's an excellent kicker as well. But their short kicking game, they don't kick the ball long. They kick the ball a lot, or this is what they've done. They don't kick it a lot long, but they kick it a lot and they contest.
Yeah, they
put so much pressure on the opposition backfield or even the midfield with their kicks. And they've slowly gone away from that. There's a thing called a kick to ruck ratio, where how many rucks do you have before you kick the ball? And it used to be quite tight, and they've expanded that. And we've been sitting here saying, oh, well, this is amazing. They're expanding their game.
Yeah. Tony Brown influence.
They're looking to use the ball more. Yeah. But they've gone so far away from that in this test match that when they needed to really go back to what they're good at, they didn't do it. And I think that's an adjustment they're going to have to make, because the pressure on them now is when you think they've got to go away to play 2 test matches against the All Blacks. So there's a pressure on them to get the win. They're going to have to revert to type. Or if they are going to try and play that expansive game, I think the influence of Delende was certainly missed, because I think he enables them to play a more expansive game.
What about the influence of Pollard?
Well, that's possible as well. If they're
going to tighten the game up, they're going to bring him back, aren't they?
Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they respond. But there are other
They'll
things.
respond, Tony. Don't think for a second.
I mean, in terms of their selection, but also in terms of their game
I wouldn't
plan.
be surprised if they win big in Cape Town, because Australia have already got what they needed to get out of there anyway, haven't they?
Well, yeah, but I think
they've got a lot of injuries.
They'll want to build on that too. One thing that South Africa have got to sort out is their lineout.
Yeah.
When your lineout's going at 68% in a test match, in fact, it was actually worse before they made the change. Malcolm Marx, I think, was like at 60% off his throws. They made the change at hooker, and Mbonambi came on and improved slightly, but 68% off your own lineout ball. That's a cause for concern.
To me, Tony, it's the psyche of it, though. I mean, how important is that aura of invincibility has been burst? And every match that they play from here on up until the 2027 Rugby World Cup, you only have to beat them once at a World Cup. Surely that says to every other team on the planet that we can knock these guys out.
It's funny because that expression, aura of invincibility, it makes my eyes roll in my head, because I've seen it so many times in the British press over the years about taking chunks out of the All Blacks' aura of invincibility, and now people are applying it to the Springboks. No one's invincible in this game anymore.
But you start believing it, don't you? And I wonder whether the other teams and players start believing it, Tony.
For sure. I mean, there's been an air of confidence, a swagger about South African rugby
and deserved,
because they've had such success. But we did say last week that maybe a little bit underdone from what happened in July. When, you play a mishmash Barbarians team, you play 2 tests against understrength Italy, and then you play against Georgia, whereas Australia's been playing against the Lions. Not the greatest Lions team of all time, but still a very good, solid Lions team.
I wanted to ask you about that, just in terms of their work at the breakdown, Australia, from what you saw against South Africa. You know, how much of that had to do with the fact that they had 2 massively contestable tests against the Lions in those areas,
who had an exceptional loose forward trio.
So those guys are so battle hardened coming into that. Maybe we underestimated that about them as well.
Fraser McWright did miss a tackle. I think it was when Khaleesi scored. But other than that, he was the best player in the game at the breakdown. He was fantastic.
Well, what were they doing? Because South Africa were getting in their 22 and losing the ball. What were the Aussies actually doing?
They were just getting in there and contesting.
Just wrestling it.
Yeah. The other thing too I noticed about the Springboks was that they looked a bit lead-footed at times. I mean, you think when you got Harry Wilson out sprinting people on the way to the goal line, when their wingers, I mentioned Jorgensen, yes, he's got electrifying speed, but he just left them in their dust, and they did look a bit heavy of foot, and that was an interesting one. Is that a sign of maybe there's a bit of age starting to creep into it, or we've been waiting for the time to come when maybe this players playing all year round started to impact them? I don't know. I wouldn't make too many sweeping judgments based on one test match, because it'll be just like them to bounce back, as you say, and score a good win, and normal order will be restored. I think if it starts to become a pattern, that's when maybe...
What I'm looking forward to is how many of these questions and answers start bubbling around in that coach's head. Because you've got to remember, it wasn't that long ago that we were all arguing about whether or not doing a line out in the middle of the game and all of these quirky, cute things, were actually within the law book and distracting from that. Well, I mean, that all looks rather silly at the moment, doesn't it? Because you didn't do the very basics right in this particular test match. So what does he do now? Does he start second-guessing himself? And again, we're going to guess whether he does or whether he doesn't do that. I think this is the best thing about it. It just creates all kinds of other narratives around the Springboks and how they play and how they're going to play their next few games.
Well, I'm not going to write off the Springboks. I think if they just go back to what they're really good at, they've got to sort out their line out, obviously, because Australia will know that they can have a go at them there. But if they do that and perhaps just rein in their willingness to try and move the ball around, which doesn't look like it comes naturally to them at the moment, or didn't in this game, then that makes them strong again. They go back to what they're good at. I'm not going to start writing any obituaries for South African rugby just on the basis of one test. But having said that, I thought outstanding performance by Australia. Showed incredible courage for a team to be that far behind so early on in a test match. so far away from the conditions that they've been playing in. Remember, they've been playing in the rain
the wet,
and what have you.
Yeah.
At sea level in Australia, to be on the high felt, to be able to go there and uncork a performance like that, that's phenomenal. And it makes some of the criticism of Joe Schmidt, talking of pathetic, some of the things that people have said about him over the last few weeks, that makes that look pathetic.
What? 2 questions to let you go, Tone. I mean, we talk about this. We're going to talk about this all week. This is, I just think it is just the best story that has happened in international rugby in a long time. Because all of a sudden, every expectation that you have is pretty much out the window now. A couple of things. Joe Schmidt engineered Ireland beating the All Blacks for the first time in 2016. Where does this stack up against that? Is this an equal victory going to the high veld under the circumstances with a back-to-back world champions and beating South Africa like they did?
That's
with 38 unanswered points.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure there's a definitive answer to that, because obviously beating the All Blacks for the first time was monumental, because they'd never done it before.
Yeah, 100 years, yeah. But they were getting closer over time, remember? 2013, it was an Aaron Cruden kick. They were getting closer to us.
Yeah. And they got everything right in that game. The All Blacks certainly didn't. I think their selection was a little bit flawed for that game. I don't think they were quite up for that game.
Oh, the field was too narrow, Tony.
Oh, no, it wasn't. Not excuses. The All Blacks weren't on point and Ireland took full advantage. But they have scored, to my way of thinking, that was notable because it was the first. They've scored better wins over the All Blacks since then,
that time,
in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think winning in New Zealand was probably more significant in some ways, even though it wasn't the history-making or history-breaking win of Chicago. When you consider that Australia hadn't won a match at Ellis Park since 1963, I think it was something like 12, 13 years since they'd won a game
in South Africa.
Yep, no question. This is... Well, certainly it's the biggest result that he's had since he's been with Australia, and one of the biggest results of his career. Where it stacks up in a one-off context, probably the best.
All right, and what does the number 1 ranking again mean? Does that mean anything to you? See, it doesn't mean anything to me, because I just want to beat them at home. So, but here we are, we're number 1 in the world again.
Yeah, it has some significance this year because of the way they're going to do the World
Seeding
Cup.
the World Cup, yeah. Well, certainly for Australia, Tony, you said that last week, that they're in 6th at the moment. They have to maintain that to get a top seeding in one of the 6 groups, right?
And it looks like they'll be able to comfortably do that now. There's a bit of a gap starting to open up there. How significant? I suppose it looks nice, doesn't it?
Always.
In paper.
Always.
It strikes me as being slightly absurd that Ireland can move from 3rd to 2nd without playing a game.
Those are the rankings. It's like the ICC rankings. Try and figure those things out.
And the way things are weighted too is that you get very little out of beating a team ranked lower than you at home, but you lose a lot if you lose that game. So I think they dropped something like 3 points, which is quite significant. It's quite huge, but in the overall scheme of things, what does it really matter? Does it have any impact on the All Blacks, from what Scott Hansen was talking about, they weren't even aware of it. Didn't even know that was going to happen. And
Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect.
DSPN.